Don't mess this up.
What? Oh, welcome to Occasionally a Show, where we occasionally bring you the worst news possible. Last week was Valentine's Day, a time which most people don't need any more reasons to be depressed. Got a big fat one Wednesday afternoon. Okay, so according to the Gun Violence Archive, which has recorded every attempted mass shooting this year, there have been 30 different shootings leading up to the Parkland tragedy, which now has officially been called the deadliest school shooting in the state of Florida. I hate how many qualifiers that statement has. And since the 14th, there have been an additional 4 shootings, leaving 2 dead and 20 injured. The most recent one occurring just this Sunday, which is just 2 days before the taping of this show. And by the time you watch this, there may have been even more. Which means, currently, there have been 11 total shootings in February alone. And we're only on day 20 of the shortest month of the year, you guys! Which means, for every other day for most of this month, some psychopathic dipshit has gone into a public place and fired openly and been more successful than not. And with Parkland, that puts the total at 31 lives since the start of February and 55 people total since the start of the year. See, this is why I hate math, right? Nothing good ever comes from it, just like no good comes from owning an AR-15. This news, of course, is as heartbreaking as it is normal. And if you really start to think about that, you should be feeling pretty sick right now. Of course, now comes the classic question, how could something like this happen? A mentally unfit person legally purchased a military-grade weapon in a state with infamously lax gun laws and a history of mass shootings as a result. What's the question? Well, it seems to be, how could we numb ourselves to something so horrible happening so frequently, especially when other similar countries had this type of thing occur and, I don't know, made lasting change for the better? Hey, Australia. Hey, Chris Hemsworth's abs. You guys are so much better than us in so many ways. Love you. I guess if you really want to find out where this cycle of tragedy began, we'd have to go all the way back to the late 90s, where presidential sex scandals still mattered, Adam Sandler was funny, and the shock of children being murdered in their schools could last longer than one news cycle. This is really where we came into our own when dealing with mass shootings. We were horrified, we were transfixed, and we were ready to put the blame on anything. Marilyn Manson, doom, bullying, trench coats, anything except for the tools in their hands. We made documentaries, exploitative Christian schlock. We even gave one of the shooter's mothers a TED Talk.
After a lot of reading and talking with experts, I've come to believe that his involvement in the shootings was rooted not in his desire to kill, but in his desire to die.
Cool. And then, most importantly, we moved on until the next one, and the next one, and so on. Maybe if we took a stand then, looked at the children we lost, been like our Australian brethren and said no more, and put some kind of ban on guns early enough, then all of this numbness to this hellish cycle could have been averted. But we didn't. We were too busy falling into the NRA's traps. We were diverted from the real issue. My favorite scapegoat is video games. Because back in the 90s, they were still new enough to be scary, and now they've become old reliable when you're trying to distract people from enacting gun control.
The National Rifle Association has come out to say that the real problem isn't guns, but instead violent video games. So we wanted to know, is there really a connection between virtual violence and real-world violence?
Through vicious, violent video games.
Which means, in the time we waste our breath explaining what a truly stupid idea video games causing real-world tragedies is, gun sales have gone up because the only people who benefit from mass shootings are gun manufacturers and the NRA. Because remember, kids, terrorist groups benefit from terror. That'll be like a recurring theme. See, because the NRA and the GOP don't have to be right. In fact, the more infuriatingly wrong they are, the better it is for them, because all they have to do is wait for America's famously short attention span to move on to the next shiny thing to be upset about without ever really doing anything about gun violence. And with Trump, they got a freaking disco ball of distracting scandals. Already there's another story about another model that he had another affair with, and as tantalizingly gross that is, and in the same way pimple-popping videos are oddly hypnotic and more pleasant than thinking about Trump having sex, we can't take our eye off the dead kid. Because the moment we do, there's going to be a lot more. But it's hard, because these living embodiments of evil have come up with ways to prolong the gun debate, mostly by making it a debate. They took a universal issue and made it political. They made it a hot button issue and lumped it together with a bunch of other political ideology. Don't like abortion? Well, then you don't like gun control. Value your land and your freedom? Don't let those fascists take away your freedom stick. Here, buy 8 more because at any moment Obama will take them away, which he never did. And don't focus on how we're directly profiting off tragedy. It's this idea of all or nothing. Either you give away all of your guns or you hold on to all of them along with your freedom. Except no one's actually proposing a universal ban on all firearms. But the second I say that, then someone says I'm wrong, the debate continues, and more lives are lost while we endlessly argue. But getting people to needlessly argue is nowhere near as effective as their most powerful tool, silence.
A day of reflection, a day of mourning, a day of gratefulness for those that were saved. And I think that there will be certainly time for that policy discussion to take place, but that's not the place that we're in at this moment.
Investigation has not even been completed, and I think it's premature to be discussing legislative solutions if there are any.
I'm sure will be rather a day for discussion of the usual Washington policy debates, but I don't think today is that day.
I guess the news breaking, or certainly hours of it breaking, for him to come to the podium and immediately begin to say, all right, this is a great opportunity for me to grandstand and jump up on the stump and let's talk about gun control.
On Tuesday, it was a high school in Kentucky. Monday, a school cafeteria outside Dallas, a charter school parking lot in New Orleans as well. There have been 11 shootings at schools in the first 23 days of this year. In October, after the Vegas shooting, you said it was an unspeakable tragedy from that podium, said it was a day for consoling survivors and mourning those who we lost. But you said there's a time and place for political debate. What has the president done in the time since October to try to prevent any of these shootings from taking place?
They make it to where you can't discuss ways of preventing tragedy without being disrespectful to those who just lost their lives. And by saying not to make it political, they're making it extremely political. But when you're trying to prevent gun legislation, the best thing to say is nothing at all. Which is why the survivors of Parkland are speaking up and they're showing no signs of backing off. They are calling out the president on Twitter and the NRA out in the streets.
If the president wants to come up to me and tell me to my face that it was a terrible tragedy and how it should never have happened, and maintain telling us how nothing is going to be done about it, I'm going to happily ask him how much money he received from the National Rifle Association.
They are organizing a protest right on Washington's doorstep and not letting us forget whose fault this is. I mean, yeah, it's the idiot's fault for actually doing the shooting, but the idiot's an idiot. And it's the system that allowed him to act in such a horrible way that we need to focus on. Though, speaking of the idiot, I wonder if there's any way we could have stopped him personally. Of course, it's unfair to blame the families of the people who commit these heinous acts, as they are often as much of a victim as anybody else. Except in this case, where they are kind of to blame.
They were just hunting rifles?
Well, I knew he had an assault rifle. I knew it, but I knew he used it out hunting.
And that seemed a reasonable thing?
It's his right to own a gun.
And you thought it was fine for a 19-year-old to have an AR-15?
It's his right to have it.
Do you feel any differently about that now?
No.
In the future of 17 others and their families.
Their families.
It was a very selfish act.
Do you feel any responsibility for that at all?
We feel heartfelt sorrow for the families involved. As far as being responsible, feeling responsibility, you know, we worked that out, and there was nothing different we would have done.
Well, mister, I gotta say, I know a depressed teen with multiple firearms and no criminal background isn't enough for the FBI to look in on him, but maybe his acting guardian just possibly could. This is our personal call to action. It's this toxic mindset that allows this kind of thing to keep perpetuating itself. It's these kind of people who seem to be unwilling to prevent any further harm no matter what happens. And it's how this fell on the young to fix the old constant failures. And the kids from Parkland have shown us that they refuse to move on from this. I mean, they can't move on from this. And we should have never moved on without doing something about this in the first place. And hopefully, with help from their continued strength, we won't do that again. We, as a country, have dug ourselves in a hole so deep that it's almost impossible to see any light. We have to find our way out of this depth, even though it'll take the rest of our lives. Hopefully, those won't be too short. This is our Congressman from Arkansas's Tom Cotton's phone number for his Little Rock office and the one in D.C. Okay, we're going to be taking a big closer look at him next week when we look at the people who were really responsible for this continued pattern of bloodshed, as well as those who were students who are being forced to march for their lives and ours. For now, flood his phone until not even the Ark could rescue him from this wave. And we'll see you next week. Until then, stay active.